Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's dive in. We will begin our review of global economy with key releases in the US, Europe, and India. The U.S. economic growth in the third quarter was revised higher to 5.2%, and the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure eased in November as expected. Inflation also declined in the Eurozone, Germany, and Spain. The slide in inflation reinforced bets that the central banks of the industrialized nations are likely to hold rates steady and may consider lowering rates in the second quarter of 2024. Much of the decline in inflation is driven by the sharp fall in energy prices from a higher base in the previous year rather than the actions of the central banks. India's September quarter GDP expanded at a faster pace of 7.6%, and the manufacturing and construction sectors expanded following the sustained increase in infrastructure investment by the government. Crude oil prices were in focus after OPEC Plus members struggled to agree on 1 million barrels per day production quota, and Saudi Arabia extended its voluntary production cuts to support the rebound in energy prices. WTI crude oil prices declined 6% in November and extended the 9.4% loss in October after uneven recovery in China, global economic uncertainties, and a lack of clarity of oil supplies from the U.S.-sanctioned Iran and Venezuela weighed on the commodity prices. Both the WTI and Brent crude oil prices are down 6.5% and 7% in the year so far. Let's review global financial markets, currencies, and key commodities. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury bounced around a two-month low after recent economic data confirmed that the Federal Reserve is more likely to end its tightening cycle. Gold hovered around the $2,000 mark after the dollar drifted lower and the yellow metal gained 3% in November. Crude oil fell about 7% in November and extended its losses for the second month in a row, and OPEC Plus members announced a production cut of 1 million barrels a day. Natural gas prices in Europe fell to €43 per megawatt hour and fell for the seventh week in a row because of full storage in France, Germany, and Italy, offsetting colder weather predictions across Europe. The euro eased to $1.08, the level last seen in mid-September, after investors reviewed hawkish comments from the Fed Chair Powell while assessing the latest economic data pointing to a slowdown in inflation. The yen rebounded to 148 against the dollar, a three-month high, after the dollar continued to drift lower as comments from the U.S. policymakers reinforced the belief that the central bank is likely to hold rates steady for now. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq composite extended gains for the fifth week in the hopes that rates are likely to remain steady and may begin to decline in the second quarter of 2024. European markets extended gains for the third consecutive week after the decline in inflation in Germany and Spain, and the Eurozone reinforced bets that the European Central Bank is done raising rates for now. The Nikkei 225 average in Tokyo hovered near a 33-year high after manufacturing activities contracted for the sixth month in a row in November, and the jobless rate inched lower to 2.5% from 2.6% in October. China's stock market indices struggled after the latest economic data suggested a weak economic rebound amid ongoing property market woes. India market indices soared after the GDP in the September quarter expanded at a faster than expected pace. The key 8 infrastructure sectors advanced at a robust pace in October. We now review the latest earnings releases, and several retailers and cloud computing companies dominated the headlines. Shareholder activism also shed spotlight on two leading companies. Walt Disney has reinstated its 30 cents per share dividend for the second half of the fiscal 2023 after suspending it for 3 years. The company also tightened its corporate bylaws that deal with shareholders seeking to appoint board members ahead of his proxy battle with activist shareholders. Phillips 66 jumped 4% Activist investor Elliott Investment Management disclosed a stake of $1 billion in the energy company in the hopes of a potential gain of 75%. Ulta Beauty soared 11% after the retailer reported strong third-quarter results and tightened its full-year revenue outlook. Samsara increased 13% after the IoT company for truck fleet operators reported strong sales gain in the third quarter and estimated similar revenue growth in the current quarter. Pure Storage plunged 16% after the data storage company estimated lower than expected revenue in the current quarter and in the full year. Salesforce soared 9% after the customer contact management software company said revenue in the latest quarter increased 10% and the net income soared five-fold. Snowflake jumped 7% after the software company reported that revenue jumped in its latest quarter, but net loss expanded and non-GAAP adjusted free cash flow jumped 70% from a year ago. General Motors advanced 9% after the vehicle maker announced a $10 billion stock buyback, raised its dividend, and reinstated its annual outlook. Foot Locker surged 9% after the specialty athletic retailer reported a smaller than expected decline in revenue in its latest quarter. Petco plunged 17% after the specialty retailer took a $1.2 billion goodwill impairment charge and flat same-store sales in its latest quarter. NetApp soared 10% after the intelligent data infrastructure company reported better than expected quarterly results. Looking ahead next week, economic news is expected to dominate headlines, and few companies are scheduled to release earnings. On the economic front, investors are awaiting the release of the U.S. non-farm payrolls, wage gains, and jobless rate, and JOLTS job openings in November. In the European Union, economists are looking ahead to the release of retail sales and the second estimate of the third quarter GDP in the Eurozone and international trade report from Germany. In Asia, investors are looking ahead to the China's international trade data, and the Reserve Bank of India is expected to hold interest rates at 6.5%. Australia is also expected to announce a third quarter GDP data, and the Reserve Bank of Australia is expected to keep rates unchanged. You can read daily U.S. and global financial market news, earnings calendars, stock movers, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can also get the latest financial books on redera.com and keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com. That is all for today, and we will see you next week.